Hello, and welcome back to the Profitability Podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, I have a little friend here just for the introduction. Um, but today I want to introduce you to Christina, who is the founder and CEO of Valor Payroll. And Christina is amazing. We got to meet her, which you'll hear in just a minute, during our time at the High Five Grant. And she is really a specialist in HR, but specifically payroll for small business owners. So Christina is the president of Valor Payroll Solutions, the company she founded in 2020 following her husband's return from deployment. Under Christina's leadership, Valor has rapidly grown into a trusted partner for small businesses, particularly those with fewer than 50 employees who are often underserved by national payroll providers. Her dedication to excellence was recognized when she was honored as the Oklahoma Payroll Professional of the Year for 2024. Valor Payroll Solutions has received numerous accolades, which we'll talk about in the episode today, some of which include being selected by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as one of the top 100 small businesses in the country in 2024. Additionally, Valor has been awarded Best Payroll Service in both the Tulsa and Bartersville for several consecutive years. Christina and her team focus not only on delivering reliable payroll services, but also on supporting business owners through a robust network of strategic partners, ensuring their clients have the resources they need to thrive. In addition to running Valor, Christina loves spending time with her family, including her two boys, Rhett, who is 7, and Gunnar, who is 5. She's also passionate about fitness and enjoys spending time in the gym doing CrossFit. Could not be me, but way to go, Christina. With a passion for helping small businesses succeed, Christina continues to drive Valor Payroll Solutions toward new heights, making a significant impact in the communities they serve. As someone who is well-versed in small business payroll processes, I can tell you that Christina does a fantastic job when it comes to running your payroll and offering the HR perspective of payroll. As we all know, finance and HR are very well connected, especially when it comes to payroll. And while we offer the financial side, Christina offers the HR side and is incredible. So please help me warmly welcome Christina from Valor Payroll. Welcome to the Profitability Podcast. I'm Joey.
And I'm Mackenzie.
Join us as we explore success in business and life, proving that while finance may not feel sexy, profitability is. We are back with today. We have Christina with us, who we actually met through the High Five Grant, which you were a top 10 finalist of. If you haven't heard of the High Five Grant, it is a grant designed to help mom entrepreneurs to help get their business started. And we were lucky enough to sponsor the grant. And so as part of the sponsorship of this grant, we got to meet the top 10 finalists, and Christina was one of them. And as soon as Christina presented to us, along with the other judges and panelists, I knew that I had to get to know her because she is a payroll expert. She's a woman after her own heart. So Christina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
I am excited for our listeners to learn a little bit more about Valor Payroll and a little bit more about what you do and what you specialize in. Why don't you give us a brief overview of maybe your journey to becoming a business owner, and now that you're a business owner, tell us about what your days look like, what you guys do as a company.
Oh boy, it's a rough day for that question in the middle of December.
Yes.
So, thank you again for having me on. I started the company in 2020 and actually started in payroll in 2009. If you are thinking about a career in payroll, don't. It's my
Run.
best advice. Just don't. Just do something else. I'm just kidding. It's a weird industry because there's not really specialized education for payroll. Like, there are certificates and trainings, but no one in their college path is pursuing a payroll career. So a lot of times people just happen upon it on accident. they kind of get tasked with it. And that's exactly what happened to me in my first quote unquote real job after college. And I just found that it was something people really didn't like. I was hired as an HR admin assistant, and my boss was great at HR, and payroll was just under her umbrella, but numbers weren't her thing. So, that was one of the first things that she gave to me, like very happily, like, sure, you want to learn more, have payroll. But it crosses paths with everything. So there's this big disconnect in the company I was working for, and I think it's pretty common, where you have your accountants on one side and they need certain things, and then there's payroll over here, and then there's HR somewhere else, and there's like a language in between that not many people understand. I learned the language. I learned how payroll related to the journal entries and the billing of our clients. And so I became not only the payroll person, but then the go between payroll and everything else. And so I just kind of kept branching out, into different areas of a business, HR, accounting, payroll, benefits. And I kept getting pushed to do HR more than payroll. And I did get HR certified first. And then after that, got my CPP, which is the payroll certification. But I just always liked payroll more. So I kept on that path, did several different things, worked with a PEO, worked for a local payroll service provider, so an independent company, for about 5 years, and then started my own company in 2020. I never really aspired to be a business owner. And when I started my company, I had a 2-year-old, and I actually filed for my LLC. No, he would have been 3, actually. I'm sorry. When I filed for my LLC for the company, my youngest had just turned 1 and my oldest was 3. So I had a lot going on, but you know, I just kind of felt, after going through different positions, that I didn't want to leave my future up to someone else. And so to me, it was the only thing that made sense. And my husband says I'm crazy, because he's like, you're the only person that would think, oh, I'm just going to start my own company because that's the only logical path here. But I did, and it's been crazy to say the least. We're, a little over 4 years in, but nearing 200 clients. We're in about 40 states. So moving along, but for anyone that is doing any business, I think it's all kind of the same uphill battle, no matter what industry you're in.
We should point out that I very unfairly asked you to record this episode the last working week of December, which is basically like payroll hell. So that's on me 100%. That it's a bad time to ask you if you should go into a career in payroll. It's the wrong week for that. Come summer months, maybe you have a different opinion, but I also think that you should take a second to tell us about all of the recognition that Valor has gotten over the last few years, because that is one of, I think, the most impressive things that you've got under your belt.
So we're based in Tulsa, but I office from home in Bartlesville. So we've won best payroll company in Tulsa, I think 4 years now. From there's actually a couple different places that do like best in Tulsa. So we've won from a couple different places. We've won best in Bartlesville twice, top 8 finalists in the High Five Grant for Moms. We were named one of the top 100 small businesses in the country by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I was awarded the Oklahoma Payroll Professional of the Year for 2024. I mean, we also got like most engaged partner from Swipe Clock, but I don't know if that I have an award for it. But, so
it's impressive, actually. Yeah. The audience may not recognize what an accomplishment that is, but we certainly do. That's pretty cool.
So, I mean, I think with it's just my personality. If I don't know exactly what I'm doing, I'm just going to double down on my effort. It's a crazy approach, but I just went for it. I mean, when I started the business, I talked to anyone who would talk to me, who had 2 cents to give. Not that I did everything everyone told me, but it was just like, okay, I'm starting a business. What do you have to say about it? What's your advice? And I still remember one of my husband's friends who was in marketing. He said, just put your face out there, like put your face on everything. Like you got to let people know who you are. And I tried to scroll back on our social media, but it won't even go back that far. But like the first posts that we made were awful. They were just awful. But I just was like, okay, face on things. Roger. Like what do I do? Canva was okay, great. Like it was just like a blue background and like a camera with, you just start somewhere and you get better. Um, like my first YouTube video, I got a green screen 'cause someone told me to do that. And then I was like all pumped about it. And I'm like, okay, great. And so I go to like edit my video myself, which you can imagine how great that is. And I cut the background out and I'm all proud. And I'm like, okay, but what do you put in place of the green screen? So I think my first video is like this big world rotating behind me or something. And I had spent like hours on this awful 3-minute video. Like by the time I recorded it and figured out how to cut the background out and the audio and everything else. And so by the time I got to that point, my husband was looking at it and he's like, "You're not going to post that, are you?" I'm like, "Sure am. Like I am done here. First YouTube video, check. Like I'll figure it out next time." But, all that being said, I think a lot of times people kind of put rules on themselves, like self-imposed. Like there really are no rules. Like you can post whatever you want, you can do whatever you want. Like the world really opens up when you start running a business and you realize how many options you have. So I just went for it. I just made a fool of myself. And, over time it got better. But I think people just have to realize like you just have to go for it. It's okay to mess up. Take it as a learning experience. If someone is telling you something negative, ask them, okay, well, what do you suggest I use instead of the giant globe behind me?
Yeah.
I'm open to suggestion.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you just have to be humble and willing to kind of look silly for a little bit, but you got to start somewhere with anything. And doing a business is no different, I think.
So, so true. Such valuable advice. I feel like we've been talking about this a little bit lately on the podcast, and we'll probably touch back on this a little bit later. But I was actually just telling somebody earlier today, I'm like, it's all these things, all those rules that you're talking about is how you refer to them. Such a scam. Like, I totally agree. The sooner that you just realize that there is no right way to do anything, the faster that you get somewhere because you're just like, okay, I'm just going to try this way and see if it works for me. Social media, YouTube, it seems like especially. And maybe if I followed all of the certain rules, I would get somewhere faster. I don't know. But it does change from things feeling a lot like a burden and a to do and a task to like something I look forward to because I'm just like, I get to do whatever I want. I'm the owner. I get to do whatever I want. I'm going to try this and see what happens. And yeah, there's definitely days where, things get comments or feedback, or I worry that people think I'm a fraud or whatever, right? I think that's natural. But knowing when you verbalize that, kind of understanding how ridiculous that actually is, you're like, actually, if they're all talking about me, I'm actually probably thinking way too highly of myself. If I think everyone's spending their whole day talking about me, they probably aren't thinking twice about me.
Wait, they're
So
not?
I know. Well, I talk about you all day. Yeah, for sure. I do.
Wait, wait.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I love that advice. That's so good. It's I think that's how you get anywhere, right? You just put yourself out there. Talk to us about, just because this is how we met, talk to us about the high five grant. What applying for that felt like and kind of that whole process.
So I can't remember where I saw the grant. I think I was just like scrolling social media and saw it. And I went to apply. It was actually a pretty easy process. I had not ever applied for any type of grants before. And I didn't really know what to expect. Found out on a Friday that I was one of the top 8 and that we'd be pitching on Wednesday. And I have also never pitched. And yeah, so it was extremely stressful. It was at the same time that the Chamber of Commerce Awards were going on. And so, it's not a ton of things that you have to do, but running a business and then taking care of this and taking care of that. And then for me personally, my husband had hurt his back. And so that Monday before we pitched was a bank holiday that I was planning on spending, figuring all that out. And instead, I drove my husband all around to doctor's appointments and then had to take him in for surgery the morning that we pitched. My plan was to be there with him. He was supposed to be out of surgery in enough time for me to drive home. He was an hour from our house at the hospital. And like, I'd be coming in hot, but I would have time, but they got backed up. So I was crying there because I had to decide, like, do I stay with him and just not present, or do I leave my husband? And so I left my husband.
Obvious choice, actually. Yeah, no, I think you chose correctly.
Which I mean, we talked about it before because it was so delayed that he didn't even go back until the time he was supposed to be getting out. So, I was there with him and I'm like, I want to stay here. I want to be here with you. What do you want me to do? And he said, well, go. So, I went, I did it. I did not take home any prizes. I really wish I had had more time to, prepare. But that's just life. And I did the best I could. And I still got to meet, I mean, those women that were in the contest, like there was one lady there that had just had a baby and her husband deployed and she had just started her company and like made it her mission to hit the revenue goal to be able to be in the contest. And like, I don't know, you just do so much and then you meet other people who are like serious powerhouses too. And also, dealing with small children and deployments and all these things. And I don't know, it was just really, really, really neat to meet those ladies. And I really enjoyed like chatting with them off. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent, but
That's what I wanted to know. That's great. Especially because I did not know that story. That's crazy town. I cannot believe that. My gosh. I love that you were like, so I left my husband. Yeah, obviously. That's what you should do. But yeah, that's so intense. You did a fantastic job. At no point during your presentation did I go, wow, did she just like prep this 2 days ago? I didn't even know because we didn't pick the top 8. We weren't really involved at all until the pitches. And so I didn't know that you guys only had a couple days. Like I had no idea any of that. Did I miss that or did you? Yeah, you guys didn't know that. So, well, you killed it is what I'm trying to say. So congratulations. I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, it's such a great grant, right? Like I think that's because we feel the same way. After we were panelists, we were like, we just got to meet 8 or 10 or whatever it was of the most incredible female business owners. In fact, all of us, after everyone finished their pitches, we were kind of in this like Zoom meeting together as panelists. And we were all just like, oh my gosh, we just feel like rejuvenated about going back and fighting the good fight. Like, I know we're a finance company, but it just felt like, okay, yeah, there are other people out here doing just what we're doing in different ways. But, experiencing similar frustrations and hard things and balancing work and kids and all those things. So to hear everyone's success stories that they are doing it despite all of that helped us continue to do it despite all of that. So I agree 100%. Okay, well, let's talk payroll and HR. So what I love about our companies, as many people know, is we do offer payroll over here as well, but we're the finance side of payroll. Our background is finance, and there is a lot of intersection between finance and HR. And HR is not our jam. We do not want to mess with the HR stuff. So when we met Christina, we were like, this is a perfect little marriage because you are the HR side. And obviously you are, like you said before, extremely talented in all areas of these and more than willing to figure it out. But we're just kind of this, I don't know, Venn diagram of both sides of payroll where payroll meet in the middle. So knowing that we've got, small business owners and mostly female entrepreneurs listening, tell us a little bit about what are some of the things that you see small business owners are doing that you really wish they wouldn't when it comes to payroll and HR? Tell us your horror stories, Christina. We're all ears.
I think one of the biggest, I started, of course, saying like run from payroll. And that's honestly just because I think it's a very undervalued service and industry. And even, when I started my career for what year is it? 13, 14, 15 years ago. Um, payroll was more strictly payroll. And then you had an HR person and then you had benefits. And so over time, with the increase in regulation and the increase in technology, it's kind of coming all under one house. Um, but that being said, and talking with the overlap between HR and payroll, the biggest thing I see small business owners do incorrectly is misclassify their workers, whether that's classifying an employee as a contractor or classifying a non exempt employee as exempt. And I say that, and there's probably people like, well, I don't do that. But a lot of times people don't understand what that really means or why it matters. So, employee versus contractor, there were new regulations about the designation. And one of the key things that they said was if the person is performing an integral part of the services that you offer, they're an employee. And I think people take these line items of employee versus contractor, and if any one bullet point is met, they're like, oh, yeah, I can just do 1099 because they brought their own computer or they make their own schedule. It's like, no, like just without any layman's terms, if that person is doing something for you that you're charging someone else for, regardless of anything else, oh, I'm getting crazy here. Um, they're probably an employee, and there's a lot of things there. Like I said, there's bullet points, do they make their own schedule? Do they bring their own tools? But the one that I like to use is, can they set their own pay rate? And people are like, what do you mean? If someone comes to me, they're not going to come to me and say, hey, listen, I'm going to pay you $20 an hour to do my payroll. Like, no, I'm an independent contractor, and to the point. And I set my terms. I set what I'm going to charge. I set when I'm going to charge you and how you will be billed. And if that person, that worker isn't doing that, they're an employee. If you're telling them you're going to pay them an hourly rate every other Friday, you're setting the terms of the work relationship and you have, financial control, and that's an employee. So that's probably the number one. The other is just, I've tried to say it so many different ways what exempt or non-exempt is. And every time I'd never even say the word salaried except in describing an exempt employee. And almost every time I have that conversation, they're like, oh, but they're salaried. Like, uh-huh. So salaried or hourly is how you pay your worker. Exempt or non-exempt is how you classify them. Now you do have to pay an exempt worker on a salary basis, but if you pay them on a salary basis, they can also be classified as non-exempt. So they just a lot of times intermix the terms salaried and exempt. And circling back to employee versus contractor, if they're a contractor, you're not paying unemployment tax. You're not covering them under your workers' comp. You're not paying them probably overtime. If there's a state that has like paid family medical leave or mandated sick leave, you're not giving them any of those benefits. And so if you get caught doing that, you will have to go back and not only pay all those things, but file W-2s, pay late payments, interest, penalties. And likewise with misclassifying an employee as exempt when they're not, then it's kind of up to the employee to, you are the one that should have had them track their time. So if you get caught, then now it's kind of up to the employee to be like, yeah, I worked like 10 hours of overtime every single week. And you as the employer have nothing to dispute what the employee is saying because you didn't have them track time. So, but I always say there's no payroll police. Like really, the employees are the payroll police, but they're a whole police force that has no idea what their rights are.
Yeah.
Awful analogy. But that's where it normally will come to light is an employee gets upset, they figure out that they've been done wrong, they make a claim. Now all of a sudden a giant can of worms is opened and they get audited for everyone. There's no one really coming, knocking on doors, double checking records. Like there's no oversight in payroll. And so it makes it really hard to convince people to do what they're supposed to do. It'd be like convincing everyone to drive the speed limit if there weren't any cops.
Although I will point out that you can get audited by the IRS and they could crack down on you for that.
Yes. It's unlikely.
Not a priority.
Yeah. This doesn't happen that often. And there's millions of small businesses. So what is your risk factor? Minimal, but what is it could legitimately close a business if they get audited. So like the risk is high, but the chances of that coming to light are low, I would say.
Makes perfect sense. We see the employee versus contractor argument all day, every day, it seems like, and it's so hard to be like, no. It's you can't actually do that. But to your point, they're like, why not? Well, because it's illegal. Because you're a good person that doesn't want to break the law. I don't know. Because you can't. Not everyone's rule follower type A oldest daughters like us. What? They don't understand.
But if there was more oversight, if there was more chance of being audited or being caught, then I think there'd be a higher chance that people would comply. But when you talk to someone who's been in business for 20 years and they're like, I've always done it this way, like they don't care what I say. They don't care what IRS document I show them. They're like, yeah, cool. But also I've not paid payroll tax forever. So I'm not going to start now.
Which is a hard pill to swallow. Payroll tax that first time it's not cheap. It's not just, people don't account for that. Well, I'm keeping their salary the same. I'm just going to make them an employee. Okay. So that's a 30% increase in what it's going to cost you probably, or,
And some states are higher than that. Depending on, what they offer.
Yeah. You might have to set up a retirement plan. I mean, it just depends, but like you said, are you a good person that wants to follow the rules and treat your workers fairly, or are you not? I mean, I'm not pointing fingers.
Yeah. And also don't come talk to me about employee retention problems when you're not willing to hire employees. I'm so sorry. Like there's very obvious answer here. Okay. So you want to fudge the rules. Fine. That's your prerogative. If you want to, you say the risk is not worth it. Fine. But if you're having an employee retention problem because they can't get benefits or they, whatever it might be, because you're keeping them as a 1099, then yeah, don't talk to me. I kind of told you the solution to that problem already. So.
And all of these people that are misclassified as 1099, I mean, they could potentially be taking like deductions and, making it work for them. But these are not people that understand what that means. They don't understand that they're paying an additional 7.65% in tax because the employer isn't covering their part of Social Security or Medicare. But, when they go to file an unemployment claim and find out that the state has no wages, that's one of the main ways we see this kind of come to light is someone goes to file for unemployment and they're like, we don't have you. And they're like, what do you mean? Here's my thing. And they're like, oh, you've been 1099. Let's talk to the business owner. Yay, payroll.
Yay, December.
Yeah.
As women, life demands a lot from us, but there is no reason for you to put your business goals on hold. At the Profitability Project, we understand that your business can't be your whole life. Balancing personal life and work is always hard, and we want to help you make the most of every day. We are here to craft financial strategies to help you achieve the lifestyle you want. With options ranging from online courses to done-for-you services, you'll discover new ways to maximize profitability, streamline your operations, and take the guesswork out of taxes. We have what you need to take your business to the next level. Interested? Learn more about the Profitability Project at theprofitabilityproject.com. That's theprofitabilityproject.com. Get ready to grow your business without sacrificing your entire life. Okay, I have a question. You have talked about how you've said this a couple times to us in our different meetings, that payroll software is a tool, not a solution. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yep.
Explain that a little bit more to us. What does that mean? Explain just kind of why you say that.
Well, so there's a ton of options. And if you've ever, tried to find a service for payroll or software for payroll, there's a ton of options. There's, super do-it-yourself like QuickBooks and Gusto. There's, more hybrid like a ADP or Paychex kind of thing. And then we're kind of at the other end, right below a PEO, where we're, service as a service, not software as a service. But when you have a payroll software of any sort, you can put whatever you want into the system. You can pay everyone in non-taxable reimbursements. You can add health insurance stipends. You can not pay overtime. There's a million ways that you can mess it up. So people mistakenly think that this software is magically going to tell them what they should do or if they're doing something wrong. And so a lot of times when we onboard a client, they're really surprised that we're like, oh, by the way, you've got several people that are under the FLSA wage limit, whatever. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Or why didn't my payroll company tell me? I hear that a lot. Well, why didn't they tell me that? Why are you telling me that? And I'm like, well, they are selling you a software or licensing you a software. It is a tool. They are not your payroll people. A lot of times they're not providing any service above and beyond. You call and ask them, how do I do A, B, and C in your software? And they will tell you. But for example, if a client called, I don't know, a payroll company, I won't name names, but if they called a payroll company that they're working with and they said, hey, how do I set up a contractor? I'm going to hire someone for 3 months. And if they work out, I'm going to move them to W-2. They would come back with, oh, here's how you do that. Instead of, oh, well, just so you know, employee versus contractor is based on the work performed, and you really shouldn't do that. And you should, if they're an employee, they're an employee. So it's that whole human element of what are you trying to do? And is this actually legal? That isn't in the software. Now that might change as AI gets bigger, but how would you input everything that you're doing into a software? Like, I own ABC company, my employees are here. Even like in QuickBooks, one of the biggest things I see people do wrong if they have employees in other states is they don't know that you have to set up different work locations. And so the taxes are going to be based on the work location address and the employee's address. UI or unemployment, state withholding, paid leave, all the things are going to be determined based on what they put into the system. But it's junk in, junk out. So if you're located in Texas and you have an employee in Washington and you put their work address as Texas, well, then the system isn't going to recognize that the employee should get CARES and paid family medical leave and L&I instead of regular workers' comp. You could give me all the tools I need to build a house. You're never going to get a house out of me. And it's the same thing. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter what software you have, you will not have accurate payroll.
We've said this on the podcast before. If anyone's talked to us for longer than 5 minutes, they know that we are so passionately, I shouldn't say against, because do what you want to do as a business owner. And obviously, if that's what you want to do, but like, no one understands the implications on their business of hiring people in new states. It makes us crazy. And it's not their fault. It's not their fault, right? Like, there's no education. There is no class in your MBA program that lets you know that these are the implications of hiring somebody in Texas when you're a Utah business, right? Like, that just doesn't get covered. But the amount of money that I've seen leave small businesses because they just didn't know that it's actually better to just stay where you're already at is tragic. It's really just sad.
Like we have a whole project template for when someone goes into a new state. And, we look at paid family medical leave, sick leave mandates, retirement mandates, pay frequency mandates. I'm probably missing something. But again, software service. If you just plug it into the software, it'll be on its merry way. It won't be right. But with a service provider like us, we are the people, the go-between between that machine and the data, the company. But I don't discourage people from hiring in other states. And a lot of times we'll do like a employer cost calculator for them with like the different UI rates, workers' comp rates, any other benefits that they have to offer. And that way, at least they can make an informed decision about, whether or not it's worth it to hire someone there. I tell people, I'm like, just stick to the middle of the country. Come on.
Yeah. There are states. Okay. So that's important to point out. There are some states that are way worse than other states that, some I will be like, okay, I really need you to pray about this. Like, I really need you to listen to your heart of hearts. This is worth it. I love that you have a calculator because if they're, like you said, I don't care if you hire in Washington or California or whatever you want to do, New York, Florida. But at the end of the day, if it's your choice. And if that employee is like that important to you, as long as you know that it's going to take this in order to accomplish that, then do what you want to do. It's the ones that do it without realizing it might cost a lot of time and effort and probably a good amount of cash depending on where you're hiring. California, Washington, New York, Florida, stay away if you can. Florida, I just feel like Florida gets so complicated so quickly. I don't know. I just have a red flag. I don't know.
Oh, I'm like, they're not on my naughty list. All the other ones you named are definitely. But Florida, like,
I feel like Florida's system is like back in the old days. Like I have such a hard time with Florida's system with anything that I have to get to Florida. I'm like, why today? I feel like they're living in the old days with their system,
but rules wise, I feel like they're pretty easy.
Yeah.
California is my like number one. If you're gonna hire remote people, like just don't. Like, just don't. You have to pay more. You got all these rules. They're very pro employee, which isn't bad. I imagine that most businesses are not compliant in California. They make it nearly impossible between the rules. I mean, even new hires, you have to give them like 12 forms. Like you have to have a box of pamphlets at the ready to give them to your new hire.
There's that training. Like we had a company that had employees in California, and they had to do like a harassment in the office training with them. They must have extended it, and maybe this was a couple years ago, but yeah, we had to like do like sexual harassment training. They had to give that to their employees. Like we had to like create a thing for them to like distribute to their employees and do a training on. Like it was required. You had to do it.
Yeah, all the nexus that comes along with registering an employee in the state, it just creates nexus for a lot of other things, and then it just opens a can of worms that as long as you're prepared for that can of worms, great, I'm fine, do what you want to do. It's the ones that I'm like, yeah, that's what, yeah, all of this takes.
Do you have like a sheet for your purposes? Because that's something that I haven't explored. I know I know in certain states, if you have a remote worker there, it creates nexus and you may have to pay, it goes above and beyond payroll. I don't have any like cheat sheet on that to give to clients. I just let them know, like, you might want to talk with your accountant to see if this, might create any potential other things for your business, like your sales tax, franchise tax. But yeah, that's one thing I don't know when it comes to like what all goes into payroll.
And that's why finance and HR are like always going to be intertwined in some regard because I think the same thing. Like, different. I don't know of a good example off the top of my head, which is proving my point. But basically saying that the employer's requirements for certain things like trainings, that's not something that we just knew off the top of our head. That's more of an HR kind of jurisdiction. I certainly didn't study that going to accounting school. Like that's just not on our side of the fence. And so it's important. And I love that there's an option now for small business owners to have affordable HR and finance options. But when they are like, well, I only have 2 employees and 7 contractors, I don't need HR.
Not anymore. I mean, I feel like to some extent that used to be, if you had a pretty small business, like, it'd be okay. But the number of rules and regulations that have been added in the last decade or so, I mean, it's possible, but you have to actually make it a part of your job to go research it yourself if you are doing do-it-yourself payroll. That doesn't mean just putting the numbers in there. That means being aware and keeping up with federal, state, and local regulations.
Amen. That's true of taxes too, and something that we find ourselves talking about a lot. Could you learn it? Yes. It's not like I'm the smartest person on the planet Earth. Do you want to learn it? And are you sure you want to learn it? Because there's more to it than probably just entering the numbers and hoping it spits out what's correct, right?
Like for me personally, if I'm doing something, and starting a business, of course, like I did all of it on my own. And then as soon as I could, I started outsourcing things. But when I'm doing something and I'm not an expert in that thing, it just leaves you with like this looming panic. Like, did I do that right? Is it fine? Has it been 3 years? Like, I'm not going to get audited now. It's fine, right? And you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's true of any industry. And that's why, small business owners, it's so hard because a lot of times you lack funds, but you also lack time as a resource. And so there's a trade-off, like what matters more, your time or your money. And you have to find the right partners, like that sweet spot where you get a lot of value for your money that frees up your time.
I have another question. We talked a little bit about remote work and stuff, and I am curious to know what changes you have seen in payroll from like pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID. What have you seen in changes in remote work? Because I feel like since COVID, remote work obviously during COVID was big. Everyone was working remotely. So what have you kind of seen that has changed in payroll since?
That's like a big differentiator for, I think, for everyone, for everything. Like everything changed, and payroll's no exception. With COVID, of course, everyone was at home, and so people got used to working from home, and lots of companies adopted work from home. Very recently, we're starting to see a lot of the larger corporations require people to come back to the office. And so I'm kind of waiting to see what that looks like for all these small business owners, because anyone who started a business post-COVID, that may be their model. They started with remote work. And so I don't think it's going to go away, but it's interesting that the larger companies are getting rid of it or reducing the hybrid options, or you have to at least be in the office X amount of days per week. But, I've done a ton of freelance work with helping not just, our payroll clients, but outside of that, helping them navigate that remote work. Because like you said, they'll just go hire, and then all of a sudden, oh, I didn't know I had to register in that state. Oh, I didn't. And we still see that, people are still kind of blissfully unaware of all those requirements. I think another big thing that we saw was during COVID, employers were allowed to examine I-9 documents electronically. And it's almost funny because I think most people had no idea that you actually couldn't legally do that before COVID. And so they kind of were a little wishy-washy about if that was going to stay or not. And so where they landed was, yes, you can do that, but you have to also use E-Verify if you're not going to physically examine the documents, which I think is fair. But more and more we're just seeing technology play a bigger role in payroll. Even small companies are utilizing timekeeping, electronic onboarding, automated benefit enrollments that feed to the carrier. And so I don't know that it's necessarily COVID related or just the times that we're in, but even the smallest companies now are having difficulty just doing what they used to do in a spreadsheet or something like that. Like it's just become too complex to do that. Or there's a lot of affordable options where it doesn't make sense to even bother trying to do it manually. But then also a lot of changes came into play with paid sick leave. Like we're seeing a lot more of that. More, every year more states are adopting some sort of mandate for employers to pay sick leave. So I think America's just trying to figure it out. Like, did a lot of things just to kind of get by. And now we're like, all right, what do we do now? Like, do we work from home? Do we not work from home? Do we, but yeah, I think those are the biggest changes. Just remote work, I think, is here to stay. It'll probably kind of come and go because I know if you talk to people who are at these companies, these larger companies where they're pulling it back, people are furious. They're furious. But maybe that's going to be good for small businesses that want to hire top talent, and people are willing to take different types of jobs or lower pay to have that flexibility. And I think that's a really great thing for a lot of women. And I don't, I'm not trying to be sexist, but still usually the woman's doing most of the house and kids and all that stuff. So I don't know. It's, of course, we had PPP and ERC if you want to talk about that, but those are more or less dead. I think too that people are slowly starting to understand that payroll isn't easy. And like no one wants to admit it because they don't want to pay for the service. But, trying to do a PPP loan, they need all these payroll documents, or they're trying to do ERC and they use some pop-up company and now they're gone and now they don't, So payroll has like a strong place in any business, whether you have one employee or 1,000 employees. There's so much that goes into it. And so I'm might be more hopeful than I should be, but I'm like, payroll's important. Like more and more people, like I'm trying to hire remote people. I can't do this on my own. The software isn't cutting it, or I don't know. I'm just seeing a lot of people reach out for help. Not necessarily for like me processing their payroll, but I'm using Gusto and they're holding $80,000 of my money and no one can seem to figure out, the plus or minus of it to get it refunded, or just crazy projects. And I'm like, are you sure you don't want to move over? Okay, I can fix it for you, but you might end up here again. So it's kind of shaking up the industry. And I think it'll be interesting the next 5 to 10 years to see how that kind of pans out.
I think a lot of the complexities, especially state by state, like you said, paid sick leave, kind of more of these policies and regulations, maybe not a direct result of COVID, but remote work, I think, has kind of like shaken up the need to have some of these policies. And so when you said earlier, well, maybe they used to be able to get away without HR or finance or whatever it might be, but now not so much. I think that's why, right? Is because all these regulations. And I think assuming remote work is to stay, which again, 33 million businesses have been created in the US since 2020, since COVID hit. Most of us are probably used to the majority of our business life being remote work. I know ours certainly is. And I know lots of business owners who've created after COVID. And so even if we're the only ones that stick around, that's enough that I think we'll continue to see changes in the regulations and the requirements state by state, because we know more employers have employees all over, where before it was mostly, if you work in Utah, you live in Utah. And if you live in Tulsa, you probably work in Tulsa type deal. So I agree. I think it'll be interesting to see the next 5, 10 years what other things we have to keep up on. But it's important to note, small business owners, I think, just how much information there is to keep up on. And again, is that worth you keeping it up on so that you can save $1 or $2 on payroll services and just use the software? Or is it worth paying a service as a service on top of, a software that can help? There's a beautiful integration between utilizing technology and having someone to double check the technology all the time, who knows what they're doing, junk in, junk out, and all that. So, okay, great. Well, let's see, any other like payroll nightmares that you come across that you're like, please, I beg you, avoid this mistake?
I mean, that we've already talked about the major ones. Overtime is another one that just, I don't know. There's a lot that goes into overtime. People don't realize it. If you pay a bonus and it's non-discretionary, that has to be factored into the overtime rate. And people are like, wait, what? We've never done that. And honestly, a lot of payroll softwares don't make it easy to even do that accurately. But I'm trying to think, we work with a lot of S Corp owners, and I think a lot of times what happens with kind of that group of people, or at least what we see is, they go to file their taxes and their accountant is like, oh my gosh, you paid so much in taxes. We should make you an S Corp. And they're like, okay, great. And they're like, go get payroll. And then they go on their merry way, and they don't really understand that it's not just having to do payroll, but that there's other requirements of being an S Corp. They don't understand that you still have access to all the business funds via distributions, and what to make their reasonable compensation. And so they kind of get left, their accountant is like, go do this and it'll save you money, but then they don't really get specifics. And from our end, we can't tell someone what they should pay themselves. We can show them what the taxes will be in different scenarios, but at the end of the day, we don't have their full financial situation, or know enough about what they do in the business. We can't do that for them. And then we also see a lot of times S Corp owners take like pre-tax deductions and they do not like us when we are like, actually, you can't do that if you're an S Corp owner. So, like I said, we work with a lot of S Corp owners. So that's just something we see frequently, is there's just a lot of confusion about what that means, not just in payroll, but, the other requirements to being an S Corp. They get really confused about if they can still take money out of the business or not. Or sometimes I'll get people, like right now, I have several people coming to me saying, I need to do payroll for 2024. I'm an S Corp. Okay, well, what do you want your W-2 wage to be? Oh, well, I've paid myself X amount in distributions. I'm like, fantastic. What do you want your W-2 wage to be? And they're like, well, I just told, and I'm like, no. That's like, you don't want, that's not it. So when I started at that company I worked for before here, trying to, like, my boss was telling me about S Corps, and I was like, I don't compute. I don't get it. But now I have those conversations all the time, trying to explain to people, what that means for them, what a reasonable compensation is, why it's beneficial. Sometimes it's just the owner and they're like, I don't want to pay for a payroll service. I'm like, well, you're saving 15.3% on your net business income. So as long as that's more than what you're paying me and paying in payroll taxes, like, this is a win for you. But no one explains that to them a lot of times. So I don't know. And then you probably see that a lot too, in the accounting, but you're probably not just telling people, go be an S Corp, have a good day.
See you later. No, but I get a lot of transfer clients. In fact, just this morning, exact same situation, which is truly how common it is. I was talking with a guy who's like, okay, so I actually liked my CPA last year. Yeah, he did a really good job. He did my taxes really well. I felt like he was communicative. There were a couple things that, weren't great, but can you ask for a perfect CPA? And I was like, I think you can, but that's just me. But he said exactly the same thing. Well, he recommended that I go become an S Corp. So I did that this year. So yeah, I think I need to file as an S Corp. And I'm like, okay, great. So what payroll are you using? Have you paid yourself a salary? And he looked at me like I was insane. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, oh my gosh. And then, yeah, same thing. I had another company who was an LLC, taxed as a sole proprietor, who got the advice that they should pay themselves payroll as the owner. And I was like, who told you this? We need to talk about this. And, they're like early stages of their business and every penny counts. And I'm like, no, please no. So yeah, that's a huge one. Knowing the different requirements for your business election type makes a difference across the board. Not just at the end of the year when you meet with your CPA. Please plan before that. And knowing, which election is going to make the most sense depending on how much you're taking in draws versus what you would take in a salary. A third client had, we posted on our social media about the differences between an LLC, sole proprietor versus S Corp, and what that could mean in taxes. And they did some quick calculations and realized that they would be saving a lot of money if they switched to an S Corp. And so they went and backdated it. And, they were like, we had no idea, you saved us so much money. And so it actually is worth, when I say things like, most of the time I find ways to pay for myself in a business. I'm sure you feel the same, Christina. It's like these are the type of things that I'm talking about. If I tell you one thing that helps you change the election of your business so you can save money in payroll, it will probably make up for how much I'm charging you, and it will all be worth it. And payroll is one of those that it can get so convoluted so quickly.
And these poor business owners, I mean, that's not very few people are going into a financial type industry. So, you have a lot of creatives and little shops and things, and like they just don't know. And so, of course, like, yes, everyone use Valor Payroll Solutions. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
But
yes.
you need someone, or you need something to know what you're doing. And obviously it doesn't have to be our company, but just realize the difference between working with someone that is providing a service to you versus just in our industry, licensing a software. Or in yours, I see a lot of times, well, my CPA didn't tell me that. And I'm like, well, were you paying for ongoing tax planning or consulting, or were you just paying them to file your income and your business tax return? And they're like, well, I don't know. I paid them, X amount in January. And I'm like, well, you didn't pay them to consult throughout the year or to do tax planning, or, people just have these assumptions about all payrolls the same, all CPAs are the same. And it's not to say any are bad. You just have to know what service they are or are not providing. And you can't just have expectations. It's unreasonable. But I see that a lot too, like in your industry, where people, well, I changed CPAs because I filed and I owed money. And I'm like, well, you only paid them to file. So that means you give them the numbers and they put it in, and then like blame the IRS. It's not their fault. There's no magic to it. And people just want magic. They want to pay $40 a month for Gusto and just assume that they're covered and someone's watching out for them magically on their payroll. And it's like, there's no, yeah, it's not real.
And it can be overwhelming, right? Like, you start getting into this and realizing all the things you didn't know. And for me, it makes me feel like, it's really easy for me, I should say, to feel like, well, what am I even doing? I'm not qualified to be here. Like, it's really easy for me to take that leap of like, you know what? I don't know enough. I have no business being here. I want to emphasize quickly that the reason that I have a business, and the reason Christina has a business, is because business owners aren't expected to know every single, state regulation regarding payroll. If you are a creative and your business is, selling art, if your business is anything outside of a payroll business, I would never expect you to know all the things about payroll. I would never, unless you're a CPA, I would never expect you to know all the things about taxes or, any number of things. And so find your superpower and then be okay with the fact that you don't know all these other things and find a solution for it.
Right.
And then it will be all fine. You're supposed to be here. You are a great business owner. There are the best business owners in the world and the most successful people in the world that don't know every single thing. They rely on other people to help them succeed. So just wanted to put that little friendly reminder out there for anyone that's feeling a little overwhelmed at all the things they need to keep track of. So yes. Okay, Christina, any parting thoughts for us or our listeners?
I just hope to see, my YouTube first globe video go viral after this airs.
I'm going to go watch it over and
please,
over.
Yeah.
Share it on my stories.
Yeah, that'd be great. Do that. No, I mean, like you said, I think it takes something special to just be like, I'm going to do this thing, because there's so much involved in any business and any industry, so many moving parts. You reach capacity, you have to hire people or outsource things. It's crazy. And I worked with a bunch of small business owners before, and I would tell them oh, I get it, because I work with other small business owners. I know what you're going through. And then I started my business and I was like, oh man, I get it. I got you, girl. What do you need? We got you. But don't be afraid. Whatever it is that you have in your heart to do, figure out a way to do it. Do what makes you happy. Like we talked about earlier, there's really not all these rules that we impose on ourselves, whether that's revenue goals or social media posts or how good your one pager is. I mean, just start where you're at. Do the best that you can to find people that are going to fill in the gaps, and don't give up. I mean, it's not easy for anybody or any industry. And yet there's so many people that do it and so many that fail. But that's why we're here, to help those kinds of people, to help their businesses succeed, and in turn helps our businesses succeed. So I think there's a lot in other entrepreneurs coming together, female entrepreneurs coming together. And, if you're on that journey, I would say just don't do it alone. Even if it's not outsourcing and paying other people, but find other people that are doing what you're doing or trying to do what you're doing, because having that camaraderie and okay, I'm not alone. All these doubts, imposter syndrome, all the things, I'm not the only one. Just find your people, whatever that looks like to you, and go for it.
What a beautiful, inspiring way to end the episode. Wow. So uplifted. It really came full circle. Seriously. It was oh yeah, it was a nice little bow on it. Christina, thank you so much for taking the time to tell us all about Valor. Last question for you. Please tell our audience how they can find you and how they could work with you.
Probably the easiest way to find us is online, valorpayrollsolutions.com. I'll throw my personal email out there. It's just Christina@valorpayrollsolutions.com. We always do free consultations. So if you just have a payroll question, use it. I would love to talk to you. I use all the topics in our social media, so I'm happy to go down the rabbit hole with anybody who's having a payroll conundrum. But valorpayrollsolutions.com, you can find all of our social contact info. We'd love to talk to you.
And as always, we'll put all of your information in the show notes so they can find you that way too, and make sure they spell everything correctly. So if you want to work with Christina, which obviously we highly recommend, she is a powerhouse of knowledge. We've spent time before talking about all the intricacies of payroll, and she really knows her stuff. So check her out. She's amazing. And like she said, she services over 200 clients. So she's obviously doing something right. So thanks again, Christina. It's so great to have you, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks for tuning in to the Profitability Podcast. For more business and finance content, follow us on Instagram at The Profitability Project LLC, or visit our website at theprofitabilityproject.com.